Doherty, the 6'7" sophomore from East Meadow, New York.
Leadership is learned.
A starter on Coach Dean Smith's legendary 1982 Tar Heels National Championship team with Michael Jordan.
Jordan comes down with a rebound. Clears it away to Doherty. Doherty going in against Floyd for the layup. It's good.
Leadership is earned.
Head coach at the University of North Carolina and the University of Notre Dame.
You notice Matt Doherty, he is up working every second of this ball game.
Leadership is taught.
Public speaker, author, and executive coach.
And leadership does not require a title.
This is the Rebound Podcast with Coach Matt Doherty.
Welcome to the Rebound Podcast. I'm Matt Doherty, and I'll be your host. On this podcast, we focus on the topic of leadership and overcoming adversity in an open and raw kind of way. We discuss failures and how to rebound from them. I became passionate about leadership after being forced to resign from my coaching job at the University of North Carolina in 2003. I went on a leadership journey and realized it's the most under-taught topic in formal schooling, but yet might be the most important. With me today is Danny Manning. Danny Manning won championships in high school and the NCAA title at Kansas in 1988, being named the most outstanding player of the tournament, and is still the school's all-time leading scorer. Danny was an All-American, National Player of the Year, NCAA College Hall of Fame Olympian, number one draft pick in 1988, two-time All-Star, played 14 years, and may have the record for playing for the most NBA coaches of all time. Post-career, Danny started coaching at Kansas, became the head coach at Tulsa, where he was the coach of the year for Conference USA, and coached 6 years at Wake Forest. Danny's currently working as a broadcaster for ESPN. Danny, welcome to the Rebound Podcast.
Thank you very much for having me. Excited to visit with you and spend some time talking to you.
Well, it's always good to connect. You're a class act, and been a big fan of yours ever since 1988. And I was at the game when you beat Oklahoma in Kemper Arena. That had to be obviously such a huge thrill for you and your teammates.
Matt, that was a lot of fun. Very fortunate in that sense of being on that stage 30 minutes away from our college campus and winning the championship. Very similar to what you experienced. You know, when you get on that biggest stage and you're on a team that the last team standing, you get to cut down the nets. It's a very surreal feeling. And the older you get, the more humbled you become by that accomplishment because you realize so many things had to fall your way. And you know, you had a little bit of luck, and obviously you put forth the work to have that opportunity. But you realize that at the end of the day, it's something that you're extremely lucky and fortunate to be a part of.
Yeah, amen to that. You go on, you're the number one pick in the draft, and 26 games into your rookie year, you tear your ACL. What went through your mind? How did you deal with that emotionally?
Emotionally, it was tough. It was tough for a lot of different reasons. A goal of mine was always to play in the NBA, and when you get to that attained goal, if you will, it's taken away from you. So it was very tough. I remember hurting my knee. We were in Milwaukee. I remember trying to talk myself out of it in the sense of, you know, you've had little sprains and all these little other nagging injuries before. You'll be able to bounce back from this. But in the back of my mind, I knew something didn't quite feel right in my leg. And I go back to LA and, you know, you get all the work done, you get the MRI and get your x-rays and things of that nature. They give you all types of tests on your knee. And you hear it's a torn ACL. And at that point in time, Brad, you know, those are considered career-threatening, if you will. And so I was like, oh, my gosh, this is Bernard King's in the midst of his comeback, and he provided a lot of inspiration. A college teammate of mine, Archie Marshall, provided a ton of inspiration because he came back from two while we were at Kansas. And that for me, it just got to a point where, okay, if I can get back on the court, I'll still be 6'10", 6'11".
Right.
I might not be as quick. I might not jump as high. I might not move as fast, but I'll still be just a straight postman. And so that for me was the goal, was getting back out on the court and figuring out a way to be successful. Great doctor in Stephen Lombardo, who performed all three of my ACL surgeries. master therapists and Clyde Brewster, Johnny Doyle and Carl Horn were my major rehab guys throughout all my injuries. And I was just fortunate enough to make it back. I worked hard. And I had great doctors, and, that was my goal, to get back. And so for me, that became my job. As soon as I tore my ACL, I was figuring out what I needed to do to try to get back. And I was fortunate enough to be able to come back from all three, which is probably a very proud moment for me. But hopefully no one has to go through that.
Oh, man. Three ACLs, Danny, three that you went through. You were the first player, I believe, to ever do that. After the first one, you could probably have the energy, I'm going to come back. You have the second one. What drove you to recover from your second and third ACLs, no less your first one?
Well, for me, there were a couple things. One, Matt, I have young kids, and so my kids get a chance to see me every day, and I wanted to provide and set a good example of them of, hey, sometimes life is going to deal you a bad hand, and you still got to play it. And so getting up every day and, the way that we had it set up, I built a rehab center in the backyard, and it was a building. And I did all my rehabs, my last two rehabs in my backyard in my workout room, if you will, which was a building. And I had all the equipment that I needed. My therapist would come over there, and every day that's where I'd be all day. So they got a chance to see that. And then also my love for the game. And also, Matt, knowing that I did it one time. That was it. I came back from it before, I can do it again. Mm-hmm. And the second time was actually easier. And the third time was the easiest because I know what I have to do. I've been there before. And the type of surgery was an allograft surgery. And an allograft surgery basically is a cadaver tendon. And so a lot of tests were done to make sure that borrowed tendon, if you will, would adjust and adapt to my body. And once that was the case, that was the easiest rehab because it already had the sides needed. Mm-hmm. And I'm just waiting for the blood flow to run through that graft and to connect. So wow. that made it a lot easier in terms of rehabbing because you're not waiting for the two injuries to heal, if you will.
Yeah. How long was the rehab from your first ACL?
11 months. All three were 11 months.
All three were 11 months. Gotcha.
Yeah, all three were 11 months before I could get back out on the court. And to be honest with you, Matt, I didn't feel comfortable playing again until a year after I got back on the court from those 11 months. Yeah. So it took me a year and 11 months to feel somewhat close to what I felt before the injuries, pre-injuries.
Who was the biggest encourager for you through that time?
Well, I had a couple. Like I said, my wife Julie was there. My daughter and my son Taylor and Evan were there, and then also just wanting to play the game of basketball. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. That was probably my biggest motivating factor. Is that I wanted to continue to play, and I wanted to figure out a way to be able to do that. I wanted to be involved in the game of basketball, and at that point in time, I still wanted to be a player. Yeah. And so my motivation was to do whatever I needed to do in that rehab room to give myself a chance to get back out on the court. And then if I'm not good enough, if I can't move well enough, I can't jump high enough, then okay. But at least I know I did everything I could possibly do to give myself a chance to get back out there. Yeah.
No, I mean, amazing player, unique player. At that time to be 6'10", 6'11", and handle the ball like a guard. You were kind of a little like Kevin Durant before Kevin Durant, if you will, for those that are listening and understand what Danny Manning meant to college basketball in the late 80s. You grew up in North Carolina. Your dad played for the Carolina Cougars of the ABA, I believe.
Yes.
And you won a state championship at Greensboro Page High School as a junior. Mm-hmm. And then your dad was a teammate of Larry Brown's, and Larry hired him at Kansas, correct?
Dad played for Coach Brown with the Carolina Cougars.
Oh, he did? Oh, gosh, yeah, we're dating Coach Brown.
Coach Brown has been coaching for a while. Yes.
So your dad goes to Lawrence. Obviously, you follow him, so you move, and you then go, did you win the state championship at Lawrence High School?
We lost in the state championship game my senior year at Lawrence High School to Wyandotte. We lost 2 games that year, and they were both to Wyandotte, the second game of the year and the last game of the
gosh.
year.
Yeah.
And the year before that, Lawrence High won the state championship.
Oh, so you get there. Here's this big star basketball player comes in and they win the championship the year before you got there?
Yes.
Oh, man.
Chris Piper's senior year.
Oh, so I bet you Chris throws that at you all the time, doesn't he?
Well, yeah. From time to time, it's brought up in discussion.
Chris, for the audience, Chris Piper was a starting forward on Danny's team that won the 1988 national championship, and we're talking about Lawrence High School. The University of Kansas is located in Lawrence, Kansas. So, we all like to have one-ups on our college buddies, right? Not many people have one-ups on you. The all-time leading scorer. I don't think you'll ever see that mark, beaten, because nowadays, if you were a freshman in college, you'd probably go in the top 10 picks and you'd be at Kansas 1 year. Is that fair to say?
That's very fair to say. With the climate that we're in now, maybe 2 years for me, Matt, just from the standpoint of my coaches and my mentor, my dad and Coach Brown. My junior year, there was talk of me coming out, and Coach Brown and my dad talk, and I end up. My dad comes by my apartment. He sticks his head in the door, and he goes, "You're not ready." And it's just like, that's it. That's the end of the conversation. I'm not ready. He goes, "Yeah, that was it. You're not ready." I was like, "Well, okay."
Okay.
Yeah, that was it.
Okay. Yeah, you dialed Domino's Pizza instead of, calling, Del Frisco's or something like that. Yeah. You got in your used pickup truck instead of calling a Mercedes-Benz dealership. Yeah.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. Yeah.
So, Danny, after you're done playing, you're obviously passionate about the game. You start coaching at Kansas. You get the head coaching job at Tulsa. You're there 1 year. You're the coach of the year in the conference. You go to the NCAA tournament, and you then take the job at Wake Forest. What was that decision like for you and your family?
Well, I'll go back, Matt. When I retired from the NBA, my son was in fourth grade and had not been in the same school for a whole year.
Wow.
And at that point, as you know, the travel, the wear and tear on you as an individual, let alone what your family's going through. And so for me and Julie, my wife, it was just, I want to make sure that our kids have a really good foundation from here forward with school, being in the same school, developing relationships with friends. And so we moved back to Lawrence, Kansas. Coach Self offered me an opportunity to be on the staff, and I got a chance to learn from the ground level up, and that's something I'm very appreciative of. And then once my kids graduated from high school, it was time to start looking to find out what happened. My father passed away in 2011, and that kind of jump-started my mindset, to be honest with you, being a coach, because I was like, tomorrow's not promised.
Right.
And if I want to do this, I want to get into it, I need to start. And Coach Self helped me get the Tulsa opportunity. I was actually there 2 years. It was a great 2 years, and then the opportunity came of Wake Forest. And for me, Matt, as you'll be able to understand and appreciate a lot of this, it was the thought of being able to go back home. I grew up in Greensboro, North Carolina for the majority of my childhood years, which was ACC country. Wake Forest played their home games in Greensboro at the Coliseum that you know well, because you played there so many games in general, but of course in the ACC tournament. And then going back and competing in the ACC. Right. That was, as a competitor, to me, I was like, yo, this is it. This is what you want to do. This is the level that you want to compete at and play at. And so for me, all those things together ended up being too good of an opportunity to pass, in the sense of just having a chance. Yeah.
Well, going back to your childhood growing up in Greensboro, is it there? The strong rumor was, Danny, that Matt Doherty, I was your favorite player growing up. Is that? I'd like to just confirm that on this podcast.
Yeah, we can talk about that, Matt. Matt, I had great appreciation for what you did as a player. I'm telling you.
No, Danny, you're ducking the question. You're a good politician. I was your favorite player, right, growing up?
Not my favorite player. Not my favorite, but a player I really appreciated, and I knew Carolina had to have to be successful, because you did it all. You scored, you rebounded, you assisted. great understanding.
Oh.
Playing with some talented cats, though.
Yeah,
I enjoy Michael. I'm sorry. I like Michael.
Yeah, you know what? I bet you like James Worthy too, because your games are somewhat similar.
Absolutely.
Yeah, yeah, big game.
And Sam, because Sam stepped out and made shots.
Yeah, no, they were such good basketball players and great teammates. Yes. Yeah, no. So you then take the Wake Forest job, and tell me about the transition as a leader. The transition from Tulsa to Wake Forest. What were some of the challenging moments of the transition? And, what were some of your best experiences?
Well, for us, we're talking about us, Julie and I, my wife, it was one of the easier moves we had to make from the standpoint of the Tulsa transition and the North Carolina Wake Forest transition were moves that we didn't have to consider our kids, what neighborhood we lived in, what schools that they were going to go to, and things of that nature. So it was it was an empty nest move for us. Mm-hmm. And so at that point, it was just finding a location in a house that we liked, that my wife was comfortable in, that the team could come over and spend time. And then from there, it was trying to, whenever you take over a program, you'll understand this. You try to bridge everything together. You try to bridge the former players with the current players. You try to bring about all the positives and the traditions that you've seen and you've been told about, and try to incorporate those into the program that is going on present day. Mm-hmm. And that was the mindset for me. And you go into a lot of different places, and there are a lot of different reasons that people have their feelings and feel certain ways about certain things. So to me, it was just trying to bring everybody together, and also go out and you're trying to recruit and bring in young men that fit your profile and system. But the first thing I had to do was try to recruit the guys back on the team.
Right.
Because so many guys, they didn't come there to play for you. They didn't know you. And so, spending time with them, trying to let them know what I was all about as a player, because that's the kind of style of play I wanted to play, but also as a person and a coach, more importantly, of sharing with them, I want what's best for you. I want to help prepare you for life through the game of basketball. Mm-hmm. And so that's always a challenging situation. So you navigate that, and you get out into the ACC play, and then you realize, oh, this league is different.
It's different. It's a little different.
Yes, this league is different, and you have to have a certain type of player to play in that league, mm-hmm. And to compete in that league. And that's something that I realized very quickly. And so, you kind of adapt your recruiting philosophy to do certain things, to try to get in with different guys that aren't always the ideal person that you would recruit. Mm-hmm. But in the sense of, if you can do the work academically, if you're talented enough of a basketball player and a good enough of a person, we can make all those other things work. Mm-hmm. In terms of, sometimes it was, hey, the major that you really talked about wanting to major in, we don't necessarily have that, but we're a great academic institution, and we have some of these that are very similar. Mm-hmm. So those are the types of things that you try to navigate. And then obviously you're building relationships with AAU coaches and high school coaches, and you're trying to get out and be visible in the community. So there are a lot of different things that go into it. You're trying to build relationships across campus too, not only in the athletic department, but, with different deans on campus, the admissions office, just so they get to know you as a person and kind of go from there. Yeah,
no, I understand that totally. It's all consuming. What was the most pleasant surprise when you took over and you're trying to manage change, and what was the most surprising? Because I talk a lot when you take a new job, especially in college basketball. You have about 48 hours to kind of figure it out, and you do as much research as you can, and it's like buying a house, right? And mm-hmm. You say, oh, that has nice curb appeal. You walk through the house, and the rooms are nice. The kitchen looks nice. Then you buy the house. And then you realize that maybe the heating and air conditioning doesn't work as well. Maybe you realize there's a leak in the basement. Maybe you realize that there's a train track right behind the house, and at 11 o'clock every night the train goes by. And I see that in every job I've taken. It's never as bad as it seems. It's never as good as it seems. What was a pleasant surprise about taking over at Wake Forest, and what was some of the things that surprised you?
Well, one of the pleasant surprises about taking over at Wake Forest was the fact that I got to reconnect with a lot of childhood friends. From the standpoint of elementary school friends, junior high or middle school friends, or junior high is what we called it, and high school. And so for me, being able to reconnect with a lot of those friends was very heartwarming. It was fun because you lose contact. That's just the way it goes. And so that was probably the most heartwarming thing for me going back to Wake Forest. And then, like you said, the most challenging was, you find where all the skeletons are. During the job application process, you're told about a couple of the skeletons. They don't tell you where all of them are. And then when you get there, and you open up a couple closets and you see a couple of skeletons fall out, you're like, oh boy, okay. Yeah. This is my skeleton now, and I had to figure out a way what to do with it and how to navigate from here forward. And so for me, like you said, just finding some of those challenges that pop up on you that you weren't privy of walking into it was the most challenging thing, and trying to figure out how to navigate that and also stay focused on what you needed to do, which was to build relationships across the board, recruit, and then also try to get your foundation in place with your workouts, if you will.
Danny, you were touching on the skeletons that you found at Wake Forest. What were some of those skeletons that you were surprised when you opened the closet and it came flying out?
Well, for me, Matt, as a basketball player, growing up watching ACC basketball, it was ACC basketball, right? And so I went back to coach Wake Forest in the ACC. And, just a lot of the perception of what Wake Forest was in the ACC was something that was eye-opening, from the sense of not Carolina, it's not Duke, it's not NC State, but, the perception was not as bright as I would have liked for it to be in the recruiting world.
Right.
So, you walk into gyms and, wow, that's a coach from Wake Forest, and, that acknowledgement is there. But, I realized very quickly that the pull of some of those other schools in the ACC was really
more powerful. Great. Yeah, and especially, Danny, since you and I, were playing and you grew up, because back then it was only 9 teams, and Wake Forest with Frank Johnson and Jim Johnston and Guy Morgan and Danny Young, Tichy were really good. And then all of a sudden, you had Syracuse, you had Louisville, you had Florida State, you had, all these other teams, and everyone else is investing. And Wake Forest kind of is, now in the bottom third or quarter of the league. And like you said, you walk into a gym, people know that, hey, that's Danny Manning. If you know basketball, that's Danny Manning. Or you're at least curious because you're 6'10", right? Mm-hmm. And then you say, oh, we've got a, WF on his shirt. That's the head coach at Wake Forest. You'd like to go in with equal brand of Danny Manning and Wake Forest, and then that's powerful. But when you have to explain things a little bit more than you'd like to, that makes it a tough sell on kids that are all about branding.
Mm-hmm. Yes. And so, adjusting to that. And, at first, Matt, going through it, it was kind of like, it felt like it was a personal blow. You know what I mean? Like, hold on a minute. Let's, I'm here. I want to offer you a scholarship to a great private institution, great education, prepare you for life. But you've got kids that are just like receptive to that. You have parents that are receptive to that. But a lot of times it came down to a kid saying, Coach, I just grew up watching Carolina. Yeah. I just grew up watching Duke. Or I remember when NC State, my parents told me about when NC State won the championship. And so those are things that, that kid is just like, this became my dream school. This was my dream. And so it was just like, wow, it was the pull, the powerfulness of those programs and the history of them in that state, very strong.
Yeah.
And, we made some headway, and we were able to recruit some kids to come in, but that was always challenging.
Well, your best player, I would say, is John Collins, who was there 2 years and went on to the Atlanta Hawks, and got off to a tremendous start in the NBA, and then you went to the NCAA tournament. And what year was it for you?
Third year.
So you go to the NCAA, you sign a contract extension, I believe.
Yes.
Okay. And then 3 years later, you were fired?
Yes.
Okay. This is where I want to get to, and this is where I want to drill down, because this makes for good podcasts, but really it helps people understand, because I think, people can look from afar and say, oh, that's Danny Manning. He's got paid a lot of money. He played in the NBA. He's on TV. He's got it made. But the emotion, the investment you make in any endeavor, whether you're a CEO of a company or you're a parent, but when you're out there, public, you're out there doing something you love, you believe in, and you get fired. There's a little bit of a free fall there. So what was it like? When did you find out you were going to get fired?
Well, Matt, when the season ended, we started our review of the program, if you will, and just going through that process. It was a lengthy process, and anytime you're going through those types of meetings, it's you're sharing your vision, you're sharing what you think went wrong, how you can correct it and move forward.
Was that excuse me, Danny, was that with the athletic director or just with your staff?
That was with the athletic director.
Gotcha. Had you done that previously?
Yes, I had.
Okay.
But this was a new athletic director, so this was the first. John Curry. This is the first round with Curry, and so we go through all of that, and then he makes a decision that he wants to go in a different direction with the leadership of the program, and that was that. How
was that information shared with you? Was it a phone call, in person? How was that?
No, that was right during the beginning of the pandemic. And so it was Zoom, phone calls. We were having Zoom meetings. We weren't in person meetings. Okay. So all of our meetings were Zoom, if you will. And so it was, told face-to-face, but, similar to this, it's a Zoom setup. So
were you surprised by that decision?
Not surprised, from the standpoint of we have quite a few meetings, and, as a person that, kind of looks at life in a real type of way, I understood that was always a possibility.
Right.
My father grew up in the game. He coached in the game. I've been around it, and I understood coaches got fired or get fired.
Right.
And so I always knew that was a possibility, especially with new leadership coming in. And so for me, once I get that news, Matt, it's a tornado of emotions.
Yeah. Talk about that. Talk about those emotions.
For me, you reflect back and go, wow, we had some good times. And then you get pissed because it's like, wow, I still had so much more to do, so much more to give. You feel disappointment from the standpoint of so many people put their trust into me. And my assistants moved to Winston-Salem, North Carolina, moved their kids. The reality of the young men that you brought into the program, you're not going to be able to see them walk out the door, and all those types of things. And it would go back and forth. It would go back and forth to a lot of different of those emotions. That's why I say it was just a whirlwind or a tornado of emotions. And so for me, I had to process those. I had to go through those. And so it came down to a journal, jotting down my thoughts. And trying to get it out on paper. Now, this was something that I'll burn one day. Nobody else is going to look at it and see it. But it was very therapeutic for me to write these thoughts down, because it helped me move on from getting fired. It helped me refocus in terms of getting it out of my system, if you will.
Yeah, I Danny, I run a leadership consulting practice and study leadership, and a lot of people, and I'm not a good journaler, but a lot of people talk about meditation and journaling. and the power of journaling and the power of gratefulness.
Yes.
Talk to me a little bit about those topics. Continue with the journaling. Who taught you how to journal?
Well, I have one of my mentors, Dr. Joe Carr, who goes around and he speaks to teams on team building and individual development. And he spoke to my team, and he's somebody that's become a mentor. I speak to him every month or so about what's going on in my life and things of that nature. And he's been a big help for me going through this from a mental point of view. But, for me, Matt, I broke down the word time because that's the most precious thing that we have, right?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And so for me, when I talk about time, I take the T and I'm thankful. I want to start every day with a grateful heart. I want to start every day knowing that I'm very fortunate to have that day. The next thing that I want to do is I want to get some type of insight every day. I want to learn, or I want to read something every day to better myself. Maybe prepare myself for my craft in basketball or just general education and knowledge.
Mm-hmm.
From there, every day I want to have 15 minutes of some type of meditation. It can be with sound, it can be without sound, where I'm in my thoughts and I just have an open mind and I just want thoughts to pour in. And if they're good thoughts, I write them down and try to use them and move forward from there. And then exercise, or right now my exercise consists of a lot of stretching more so than working out, but I try to stretch or work out in some way or capacity every day. So that's how I break down my day every day.
I love that, Danny. I love that.
Yes.
This is as much for the audience, as much for me as it is the audience. I write this stuff down. I'm taking notes. Time, thankfulness, every day.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Thankfulness, insight. You want to learn. You want to read. The M is for meditation, at least 15 minutes, and then the E is exercise. I really suck at the meditation and the exercise part. I'm quick to the buffet. I'm quick to the refrigerator.
Yes.
I get my steps in from my home office to the refrigerator, but beyond that, it's a challenge for me. I just don't have the. I love to run and work out when I was when I was playing, but now it's like, why do I need to do that? But this is inspiring to me. I love the acronyms. I love learning. That's awesome stuff. I appreciate you sharing.
Yeah, Matt, now understand my exercise. It's a lot of stretching. It's a lot of stretching. Flexibility is key for me.
I stretch from my couch to the refrigerator. I've got it just far enough where I got to stretch. No, I'm kidding.
Right.
So, Danny, you lose your job. How did your wife respond to that? I think that's like people don't understand the collateral damage that goes on in a household. They see a coach resigns or gets fired and they're like, okay, new guy's coming in. And they don't understand, your wife invests in the community. She invested in your home. You, I think, as a coach, quickly move on to the next challenge as best you can. And the wife is left in the wake dealing with the collateral damage. How did Julie handle the firing?
It was challenging, but I go back, Matt, even before the firing, the things that I really took for granted or didn't really pay a lot of attention to was the fact that she's sitting in the stands.
Yeah.
The fact of the things that she's hearing fans say about her husband.
Yep.
Sometimes they're good, sometimes they're bad, but fans are fans. And so, really appreciative of obviously her support, but also of the situations that I put her in as my wife and sitting, being at the games and being supportive and, having to deal with those types of situations. And so, we get fired and it's a situation where, she's been with me every step of the way ever since we left Kansas, every NBA stop, Tulsa and Wake Forest. She's learned the business. She kind of has a pretty good feel for it. And, it was just something that's, maybe it just wasn't meant to be. Mm-hmm. We just got to get prepared for our next opportunity. And so for us, it was, and when you're in the midst of it, you really don't understand people talk about balance all the time, and that's something a word that I use now more frequently than I did when I had a job, because when I had the job and you're coaching, I don't know if I couldn't find balance.
There's no balance, Danny.
I was looking for balance.
There's no balance. There's no balance. There's no
right.
balance. It just can't happen.
Yes.
Yep.
And so for us going through it gave us a chance to take a step back. This was the first year that we were able to make our own schedule without having it revolve around the recruiting schedule, the college season, the practice schedule, the workout schedule, all those things. And so for us, it was, disappointed we didn't have a job, not coaching, because she, and not only my wife, but all the other wives, they pour into the kids that you have on the team also. They're their mothers away from their natural families. Mm-hmm. And, so, missing out on that opportunity and that being taken away was something that was challenging for all of us. But it also gave us a chance to do some things that we haven't been able to do in all of our time together. Mm-hmm. We got a chance to see our son Evan is a GA with Gonzaga. So we get a chance to go spend time there. Our daughter's living in Colorado. We get to spend more time going to see them and being around them. And, I followed two teams religiously this year. And one was Gonzaga and the other one was KU. Right. And I watched a bunch of games, but those were the two teams I really focused in on just because my son is there and my love for KU. And it's been a really good year for us in a challenging situation from the standpoint of spending time and being able to do things that we normally weren't able to do together.
Did you watch any Wake Forest games?
I did.
Yeah,
I sure did. I didn't watch a lot of them, but I followed. I followed more box score with those guys just to see how the kids were doing that I recruited and brought in.
In my book, I talk about triggers and the Bitter River, and you're driving over the bridge of the Bitter River, and you're trying to stay focused, but then there's a trigger, and it could be somebody gets a job. It could be Steve Forbes getting hired at Wake Forest. It could be John Collins. It could be in the paper. It could be something, and it just triggers an emotion that wants you to drive into the Bitter River, and you got to hold on tight and drive slow and stay focused on the bridge so you don't fall into the river. Were any triggers like that for you this past year?
Yeah, John Curry. That name, whenever, he fired me. Right. I was not the person he wanted to lead the program. I was not in some way, shape or fashion good enough to lead the program. And so for me, that was a trigger early on.
So when you heard his name, what did you do? What did you feel come over your body and your gut? And then how did you spin out of it?
What came over my body was, this is the guy that took something away from me that I wanted. This was a guy that, took something away from me that I was in the process of building and making better, and I did make better. And so, having to navigate that thought process, that emotion, it took me a while to get through that. It really did, just from the standpoint of what you've invested into your program and the things that you've done. And to have that taken away from you by someone that just got there was a tough pill to swallow. Mm-hmm. I understand it's a part of the business, and you have to move forward and things of that nature. So early on for me, probably within the first couple of weeks that I was fired, that his name triggered that Bitter River situation for me.
How did you again get out of that space, that mental? How did you move back and get back on the bridge? What was your self-talk like, or did anybody help you?
Well, like I said, Dr. Joe Carr was someone that helped me. My wife Julie, we talk, and I'd be able to share my thoughts and emotions with her. And then for me, just talking to all the different coaches that I know, and not necessarily about John Curry, but walking into situations where there's a leadership change in your department, right? And having to navigate that. And then you realize that, this has happened before. Mm-hmm. I'm not the first person that this has happened to. How do I deal? How do I navigate? And for me, it goes back to the journal.
Right.
Being able to put my thoughts into the journal, write down what was going through my mind in the journal. Now, my journal is a journal where I'm not worried about the proper spelling.
Right.
I'm just worried. I'm just getting it all out. Just kind of write blah, boom, here it is. And, I can understand my scratch when I go back. And
maybe that's a good thing in case it falls into someone else's hands.
That's right. Yeah, that too. And so for me, it was realizing that, this is a part of the business. Coaches get fired.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
It's a part of the business that you're told that we don't want you here anymore.
Yeah, no.
We're going to go in a different direction. And so coming to that, the point of saying, okay, from here forward, I've got to be positive. I want to still be the person who can encourage somebody to give a greater effort or more enthusiasm or more creativity. And, for me, I have to be able to walk that walk.
Right.
I'm a coach, I'm a leader, and I have to be able to do that in my own life and mimic that. That was something that I tried to do as a coach is mimic the behaviors that I wanted my young men to see and do. Yep. And this was just a situation where I needed to do that in my own situation. I needed to let my family know that, yeah, I'm hurt, I'm disappointed, but you know what? This isn't the end.
Amen.
We're going to go through life. We've told you all along that life isn't perfect and every day's not going to be great, but you got to continue to chop wood. You got to continue to take steps. And that's something that I relied on quite a bit. And then there are a lot of other things. Like for me, Matt, I use this called the 5-minute journal. And my daughter, Taylor, turned me on to it. And it's a simple, effective thing to do to help me be a little bit happier every day. And I'm recommending this journal to all of your listeners.
Yeah.
And basically it's every day you write down 3 things you're grateful for. You write down 3 things that would make today great and something that your affirmation of the day is. Mm-hmm. And then at the end of the day, you write down 3 amazing things that happened to you. And then you write down what could have made today better. Mm-hmm. And it's called the 5-minute journal. And it really helps center me and keep me focused with the mindset that I need to have to attack every day. And then from there, it's sharing. It's reaching out to different coaches, different friends, different people in the business world, and just trying to gain some insight into what they're going through, how they're adjusting to this new pandemic, mm-hmm. and things of that nature. And so, but for me, the 5-minute journal is something that is really important to me, along with the acronym TIME.
Yeah, no, I love it. This is what this show is all about, Danny, is you talk about time and you say insight, learn and read. I talk about my leadership Doherty coaching practice. The motto is learn and grow. And what I would say to my players, let's just get better today. That's the number one goal. Every day, every practice, get better today. And I would tell my staff, okay, we're asking our players to get better. What are we doing to get better? So we need to get better each and every day, and especially in the off season. And so, this 5-minute journal and your time acronym, I'm taking them and putting them in my quiver, and I'll be using that for sure. As you look back as a head coach at Wake Forest, what did you learn? What could you have done differently?
I learned a lot. I learned that, you're walking into certain situations, and in coaching, Matt, you get a coaching job or an opportunity for one or two reasons. The coach before you had success, or the coach before you did not have success. Right. And, when you walk into situations that you're rebuilding and you're trying to change the culture to the culture that you vision. And, a lot of people talk about, you're trying to change the culture because the culture was bad. Well, a lot of times that's the case, but also part of changing the culture is you're trying to implement your vision. Right. And that's a part of the culture too. And so for me, it would have been walking into new situations and probably going back and looking at the history and patterns of the individuals that I walked into, that the new players on the team, if you will.
Yep.
And kind of make some decisions based upon my vision and what their history was or had been at that particular place. Meaning, when I walked in the door, I gave everybody a clean slate.
Right.
That's what I wanted. That's what I wanted to do. And looking back on it, I don't know if that was the right thing to do, in a sense of trying to build a team.
Right. Build a foundation, build your culture. And there were some people that had a reputation that might not fit your culture.
Correct.
Yeah.
Correct.
Yeah.
And then most of the time, those were the individuals that end up not being there long anyways, if you will. And so that would be one thing that I would definitely look at a lot differently, especially now in the era that we're experiencing with young people being able to transfer and be immediately eligible.
Yep.
You're going to lose a certain amount of kids anyways, just because of a coaching change or leadership change. And so not trying to, take a young man who's like, this is going to be a tough fit, but I'm going to give an opportunity. At the end of the day, sometimes it's a square peg in a round hole.
Yep.
And having those conversations that first year, which is tough and challenging, but that's something definitely that I would have done. And then for me, I don't even know if this is possible, Matt, but getting the schedule for years out, like what tournaments are we scheduled to play in here for? What games series are we locked into from here forward? Mm-hmm. Because so much of it is building your culture and building the confidence of your culture. And the best way to do that, as you know, is winning games and going incremental in those steps. And so that's something, too, that definitely would jump to the forefront of my mind when you're talking about taking over a program and trying to implement your culture within that program.
Yeah. No. When you lost your job, Danny, who was the first person to call you, to reach out, to lend support, to give you encouragement?
Well, the first person obviously was my wife, because I told her after I got off the call.
But I mean, somebody outside your immediate family that called and heard the news, and may have surprised you, that called you.
Matt, to be honest with you, it was a lot of coaches. Coach K called, Bill Self called, Coach Williams called. Obviously, my mentor called. Leonard Hamilton called me. I spoke with Damon Stoudemire, Juwan Howard, Shaka. So just the fraternity of friends that you've built up, the relationships you built, once they hear that news, they just reach out to you. And, and sometimes, man, as you know, you don't want to pick up the phone.
Right.
You see them called, and it's just like, but I do. I picked up the phone, and I'm so glad I did, because to hear their encouragement, to hear what they had to say, to hear them say, hey, Danny, I've been in that situation before. This is how I handled it. Norm Roberts, assistant at Kansas, we talked quite a bit about being fired and taking the next steps and things of that nature. So, to me, it was something that I got to the point of being comfortable enough to call guys and go, hey, this is what I'm going through. I know you've experienced it before. What are some of the things that helped you?
Right.
How did you navigate this space? And so for me, that was really important. And the forthcomingness of those coaches to share that information with me, because that's a very vulnerable spot.
Yes.
That's a very open spot. And I just did it for the NABC, Coaches Caring for Coaches. We did a segment on what you go through when you do get fired. I did it with Tim Miles, and I also did it with Pat Chambers with the NABC. And it was really good, more therapeutic than anything, just because you hear what they went through in different ways that they tried to navigate it and handle it. And, unfortunately, you have to turn it into a positive, something that's so negative. And that's what everybody tries to do.
Well, Robin Roberts, I use this all the time now on ABC. Good Morning America says, make your mess your message. And that's what I'm trying to do with this podcast. That's what I'm trying to do with the book. And another friend of mine, Brian Moran, says, vulnerability is the new invincibility. We need to be vulnerable. That's the only way we can learn and grow.
Yes.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
So we've got about 5 minutes here. You mentioned all these people calling you. What was the best piece of advice you heard from any of those callers?
Well, for me, it was one of my mentors, Dr. Joe Carr.
Yep.
And he said, when we address your team, when we address your staff, you challenge them to take steps. You challenge them to become better people and better at their craft. And he's like, this is what you have to do. He goes, you've got a lot of things that you got to be able to do in this period of time to get yourself to a point where you're ready for the next opportunity.
Right.
And the first thing you do is you're working on yourself. And so, for me, it is, clarity in my life. What's my why?
Right.
My why for me is making sure that I provide a great atmosphere for my family to thrive in. And I look back on when I went through my ACLs, and at the end of the day, that was it, trying to set an example for my kids. Mm-hmm. So that's my why. I want to make sure that I manage my energy mentally and physically well. I want to make sure that, the necessities in my life, what I want to do that I'm working on and trying to hone and get better. I want to be productive in the things that I do daily, and I want to continue to be able to influence and help people along their path of their journey. And so, Matt, every day I try to reach out to one person I haven't contacted or been in contact with and just say, I hope your day is going well, or if you're going through a hard time, sending you some positive energy. And, a lot of times, you understand the courage that needs to go into that, making calls for people when people are looking at you, go, well, how are you doing?
Right.
I know you lost your job. It was, but yeah, I'm going through something too, but probably not as something that is out there in the media that you're going through. How are you? And I'm like, I'm doing well. I'm blessed. I'm alive today.
Yeah, amen.
My family's healthy. And so for me, just being able to share my real self, my thoughts and feelings for that day, I'm trying to do a better job of that because, the era that I grew up in, that we grew up in, there was, the I love yous, the hugs, the pats. I grew up in an area of tough love. Yeah. And so, like you did, like a lot of us did. And
yeah,
so
what are you crying about? Get back on your bike.
Yeah. And so for me, a lot of it is what I really try to incorporate within my program the last 3 to 4 years is just the message of love. I regularly would tell our guys, I love you, I appreciate you, thank you. And try to permeate that through all my relationships with other friends and things of that nature too. So just letting people know how I feel about them. It's a lot of times it's just, I appreciate you. Thank you for everything, the impact that you've had for me. If, sometimes it's, I love you and, things like that. Being more vulnerable in my words that I'm sharing with people. And that was a direct result of the journal jotting down my thoughts.
Wow.
And being able to, come to a place where I was comfortable with that.
Danny, I can't thank you enough for sharing. I learned a lot. I mean, this is powerful stuff. I mean, again, Dr. Joe Carr, Time, the 5-Minute Journal, those are things I wrote down and put stars next to. I got better today because of Danny Manning. I love your attitude. You do great work on ESPN, and I know you probably have, like most of us, coaching's our drug. It's crazy. I say that I'm in rehab, and you're in rehab right now, and you'll be even that much better with your next opportunity if and when you decide. Again, thanks for sharing. We learned so much. Leadership is a learned behavior. You are a leader, whether you're a parent, a coach, a business owner, or a friend. We all lead in some way, shape, or form. Thanks for listening. I welcome any and all feedback. Reach me on Twitter. My handle is @DohertyMatt.